The alarm clock screamed at 3:45 a.m., but Maya Rodriguez was already awake. She had been staring at the ceiling for the past 20 minutes, her mind racing with numbers that never seemed to add up right. Rent for the food truck spot was due in 3 days, and she was still $200 short. Again. She rolled out of her narrow bed in the tiny studio apartment, her joints aching from another 16-hour day on her feet. The place was barely bigger than a closet, but it was all she could afford since taking over Abuela's kitchen 18 months ago. The walls were thin enough that she could hear Mrs. Chen next door getting ready for her early shift at the hospital. At least someone in this building had steady income. Maya shuffled to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. The mirror showed tired brown eyes with dark circles underneath. She was only 26, but lately felt twice that age. Her thick black hair was pulled back in the same messy bun she wore every day. No time for anything fancy when you were racing against time and bills. The drive to the commercial kitchen she rented took 15 minutes through empty Chicago streets. The food truck was parked behind the building, looking exactly like what it was. A 15-year-old vehicle that had seen better days. The bright yellow paint was fading, and there was a small dent on the passenger side from when she'd backed into a pole during her first week. But the engine still ran, the equipment still worked, and it still carried the legacy of her grandmother's recipes. Inside the cramped prep space, Maya began her daily ritual. First the masa for fresh tortillas. Her hands moved automatically, mixing the corn flour with warm water and a pinch of salt. Abuela had taught her this when she was 8 years old, standing on a wooden crate to reach the counter. "Feel the dough, Mia," her grandmother would say. "It tells you what it needs." The beef for the barbacoa went into the slow cooker next. Maya had learned to buy the cheaper cuts of meat and cook them low and slow until they fell apart. It took longer, but the taste was incredible. She seasoned the pork for carnitas with cumin, oregano, and orange juice. The smell always reminded her of Sunday dinners when Abuela was alive and the whole family would crowd into her small kitchen. By 6 a.m., Maya was loading everything into the truck. Coolers of prepped meat, containers of fresh salsa verde and pico de gallo, bags of corn for roasting, and gallons of horchata that she made from scratch. The truck groaned under the weight, but it had been carrying these loads for years. Her first stop was the construction site on North Avenue. The workers there had become regular customers, and they appreciated real food instead of the fast food chains. They called her chef as a joke, but Maya knew they meant it with respect. These were hard-working people who understood what it meant to earn every dollar. "Morning, Maya," called out Tony the foreman. "Got any of those breakfast burritos ready?" "Always do," she replied, firing up the griddle. The familiar sizzle of eggs hitting the hot surface was like music. She cracked a dozen eggs at once, scrambling them with jalapenos and cheese. The bacon was already cooked and warming in the steam tray. As she worked, Maya's mind wandered to the stack of bills on her kitchen table. The truck payment was 3 months behind. The company had been patient, but their patience was wearing thin. She'd received another letter yesterday with words like repossession and final notice. The thought of losing the truck made her stomach twist. It wasn't just her livelihood. It was all she had left of her grandmother. The breakfast rush ended by 9, giving Maya time to drive to her lunch spot outside the medical center. The nurses and doctors there were a different crowd, always in a hurry but willing to pay a little extra for quality food. She parked in her usual spot and began prep for the lunch menu. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Appointment at 2 p.m. today. We'll call after." Maya's heart sank. Mom's dialysis appointments had been happening more frequently lately. The kidney disease was getting worse and the medical bills kept piling up. Insurance covered some of it, but not enough. Never enough. Maya pushed the worry aside and focused on cooking. A group of medical students approached the truck, counting change between them. She recognized the look. She'd worn it herself not too long ago. Without thinking, she added extra meat to their orders and forgot to charge for the sides. "You can't keep giving food away," she muttered to herself. But she couldn't help it. These kids reminded her of herself 6 years ago, fresh out of culinary school with big dreams and empty pockets. She'd planned to open her own restaurant, maybe even a small chain. Instead, she was standing in a food truck watching those dreams get smaller every day. The lunch rush was steady but not spectacular. Maya counted the till as she cleaned up. $237 for the day, minus gas, minus ingredients, minus the kitchen rental. After expenses, she'd made maybe $70. Enough to buy groceries and put gas in her car, but not enough to catch up on the truck payment. As the afternoon wore on, Maya found herself parked outside Meridian Tower for the dinner crowd. The glass building stretched toward the sky, reflecting the sunset in its windows. People in expensive suits walked by without glancing at her truck. These weren't her usual customers. They probably spent more on lunch than she made in a day. But a few adventurous office workers had discovered her food over the past few weeks. Word was spreading about the girl who served real Mexican food that tasted like someone's grandmother had made it. Maya took pride in that reputation, even if it wasn't making her rich. A young woman in scrubs approached the truck. Maya recognized her from the medical center, probably pulling a double shift. 2 carnitas tacos and a horchata, the woman said, digging through her purse for cash. Long day? Maya asked as she warmed the tortillas. 36 hours straight, the woman replied with a tired smile. Your food is the only thing keeping me going. Maya loaded extra meat onto the tacos and threw in a free container of guacamole. Hang in there, she said, handing over the bag. As the sun set over Chicago, Maya finally closed up the truck. Her feet ached, her back hurt, and she smelled like onions and cilantro. But she'd made it through another day. The truck was still hers, at least for now. Tomorrow she'd wake up at 3:45 and do it all over again. Driving home through the city streets, Maya thought about her grandmother. Abuela had worked just as hard, cleaning office buildings at night after running a small restaurant during the day. She'd always said that honest work was nothing to be ashamed of, no matter how small it seemed. I'm trying, Abuela, Maya whispered to the empty truck. I'm really trying. The numbers still didn't add up, and tomorrow would bring the same struggles as today. But Maya Rodriguez wasn't ready to give up, not yet. The food truck might be old and the money might be tight, but she was carrying something more valuable than either. The recipes, the memories, and the determination of the woman who'd raised her to never quit. Even if it meant working 18-hour days and living on 3 hours of sleep, Maya would find a way to keep Abuela's kitchen rolling. She had to. It was all she had left. The lunch rush at Meridian Tower was always crazy, but today felt different. Maya wiped sweat from her forehead as she looked at the line stretching around the corner. Office workers in crisp shirts and expensive shoes tapped their feet impatiently, checking their phones and watches. Everyone wanted food fast, so they could get back to their air-conditioned offices. Maya moved like a machine. Scoop the carnitas, warm the tortilla, add the salsa, wrap it tight, next customer. Her hands worked automatically while her mind stayed focused on the growing stack of orders. The lunch crowd at this fancy business district paid well, but they also expected perfection. One mistake and they'd never come back. 2 chicken tacos, extra spicy, called out a woman in a navy blazer. Maya had seen her before, always ordered the same thing, always left exact change, never smiled. Coming up, Maya replied, grabbing the tongs. The chicken sizzled as she moved it around the griddle. The smell of cumin and chili powder filled the small truck space. She'd been cooking for 6 hours straight, and her lower back screamed in protest every time she bent down to grab something from the cooler. The line kept moving. Businessman in gray suit wanted 3 beef tacos for his team. College intern could only afford 1 taco, but looked hungry enough for 3. Maya secretly added extra meat. Pregnant woman craving something spicy got the good salsa, not the mild stuff. Maya's routine was so automatic she barely looked up at customers anymore. Face order, money, food next. It was the only way to survive the rush without losing her mind. She'd learned that personal connections slowed everything down, and slow service meant angry customers and smaller tips. Around 1:30, the crowd started to thin out. Maya's shirt was soaked with sweat and her feet felt like they were on fire. She took a quick gulp of water from her bottle and wiped down the counter. Just a few more customers and she could take a real break. That's when she noticed him standing at the back of the line. He wasn't like the other customers. While everyone else stared at their phones or tapped their feet, this man stood quietly, hands in his pockets, looking around at the neighborhood like he was seeing it for the first time in years. His suit was expensive. Maya could tell from the way it fit perfectly across his shoulders, but something about his posture seemed familiar, though she couldn't place it. The line moved forward. Maya served a young lawyer who complained about waiting 10 minutes, as if 10 minutes was the end of the world. Then came a group of marketing assistants who all wanted different modifications to their orders. Maya handled each request with practiced patience. But her eyes kept drifting to the man in the expensive suit. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair that was perfectly styled but somehow still looked natural. His skin was the color of coffee with cream, and even from a distance Maya could see that his hands looked soft. Not the hands of someone who'd ever worked construction or cleaned kitchens. Definitely management level, probably higher. When he reached the front of the line, Maya was refilling the salsa containers. She didn't look up immediately, just called out her standard greeting while scooping fresh pico de gallo into the serving tray. "What can I get you today? I'd like 2 of your gourmet tacos, please." Maya's hands paused for just a second. Something about the voice made her stomach flutter, like when you're driving over a hill too fast. But she shook it off and grabbed 2 tortillas from the warmer. Probably just tired. She'd been hearing familiar voices all week. "Happened when you worked too many hours. Chicken, beef, or pork?" she asked, still not looking up. The carnitas were running low, so she hoped he'd pick something else. "Beef, please. And could you add that green salsa? It looks incredible." Maya ladled the barbacoa onto the first tortilla. The meat was perfectly tender, falling apart the way it should after 12 hours in the slow cooker. She added the salsa verde, some diced onions, and fresh cilantro. Her movements were quick and efficient. She could make tacos in her sleep by now. As she wrapped the second taco, the man spoke again. "You know, this place reminds me of a little neighborhood I used to know. Had the best food trucks in the city." Maya glanced up for just a second, long enough to see expensive shoes and perfectly pressed pants. Rich guy trying to make small talk. She'd heard it all before. They loved to tell her about their college days when they ate authentic food. Back before they could afford $50 steaks. "That'll be $12, she said, sliding the wrapped tacos across the counter. He handed her a $20 bill. His fingers brushed hers for just a moment when she took the money, and Maya felt that strange flutter again. The hands were soft, but there was something familiar about them. Maybe she was getting sick. Stress could do weird things to your mind. Maya counted out his change quickly. $8 back. She was already reaching for the next order when the man cleared his throat. "Keep the change," he said quietly. Maya looked up to thank him. $8 tips were rare from the business crowd, but when her eyes met his, the world seemed to stop. Dark brown eyes with little gold flecks around the iris. Eyes she'd looked into 1,000 times as a kid. Eyes that had cried with her when her grandmother got sick. Eyes that had laughed with her during summer afternoons in the old neighborhood. The man smiled, and suddenly Maya could see the boy she'd once known hidden inside this expensive suit. The same crooked front tooth he'd been embarrassed about in middle school. The same tiny scar above his left eyebrow from when he'd fallen off his bike trying to impress her when they were 12. Diego? The name came out as barely a whisper. His smile grew wider. "Still remember me, Maya?" The words hit her like a physical blow. Maya gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. This couldn't be real. Diego Castellanos had disappeared from her life 8 years ago, when his family moved to the suburbs. She'd heard rumors over the years, that he'd gone to some fancy college, that his father's business had taken off, that the family had money now. But seeing him here, dressed like he owned half the city, was something she'd never prepared for. What are you?" Maya couldn't form a complete sentence. Behind Diego, the remaining customers in line were getting impatient, but she couldn't move. Her hands trembled slightly as she stared at this ghost from her past. Diego glanced around at the crowd and lowered his voice. "I know you're busy. I've been looking for you, looking for her." Maya's mind raced. Why would someone who clearly had everything want to find a girl working in a food truck? The old Diego she'd known would never have worn a suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. The old Diego had sworn he'd never forget where he came from, but those eyes were the same. And the way he said her name, soft and careful, like it meant something important to him. "Maya, are you okay?" The voice belonged to Mrs. Patterson, the security guard from the building. She'd noticed the long pause and was checking if everything was all right. Maya blinked and looked around. The lunch rush was ending, but there were still customers waiting. She was standing in her food truck, covered in cooking smells and sweat, while her childhood best friend stood there looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine. "I'm fine," she managed to say, though nothing felt fine at all. Diego picked up his tacos and stepped aside, but he didn't leave. "I'll wait," he said simply. And Maya knew with a certainty that scared her that everything was about to change. Maya's hands shook as she served the last customer of the lunch rush. A simple order, 1 chicken taco, but she messed it up twice before getting it right. Her mind kept drifting to Diego, who stood quietly beside a nearby bench eating his tacos and waiting patiently. Every few seconds she'd glance his way, still not believing he was real. The final customer walked away and suddenly the busy plaza felt empty. Maya began cleaning her workstation, moving slowly to buy herself time to think. What was she supposed to say to someone who'd vanished from her life 8 years ago? Someone who clearly didn't need to worry about truck payments or medical bills? Maya. His voice was closer now. She looked up to find Diego standing at her service window, the same spot where dozens of strangers had ordered food just minutes before. "Hi," she said quietly, wiping down the counter for the 3rd time. "Can we talk? I mean, when you're ready. I don't want to interrupt your work." Maya almost laughed. If only he knew that standing here talking to him was more terrifying than any lunch rush. But she nodded and continued her closing routine, hyper-aware of his presence. The silence stretched between them, filled with 8 years of unspoken words. Finally, she stepped out of the truck and really looked at him. The expensive suit, the confident posture, the watch that probably cost more than her monthly rent. This wasn't the boy she'd grown up with. This was a stranger wearing a familiar face. "You look," Diego started, then stopped. "You look exactly the same." "No, I don't." Maya touched her grease-stained apron self-consciously. "You do, though. Except for all that." She gestured at his outfit. Diego looked down at himself as if just remembering what he was wearing. "Yeah, this is different." They stood there awkwardly until Diego spotted a small park across the street. "Want to sit down? You must be tired after all that." Maya hesitated. She should get back to prep work for dinner service. But when would she get another chance to understand what had happened to the most important person from her childhood? They walked to the park in silence and sat on a weathered bench under an old oak tree. The contrast between them was even more obvious now. Maya in her work clothes, Diego looking like he belonged in a boardroom. "So," Maya said, staring at her hands. "Diego Castellanos, I heard your dad's business took off." "It did." His voice was careful, like he was walking through a minefield. "How did you hear?" "Mrs. Garcia from the old neighborhood. She said your family moved to Lincoln Park, that you went to some fancy school." Diego nodded slowly. "Harvard. Business school. Harvard." The word hit Maya like a slap. She'd barely scraped together enough money for community college culinary classes. And he'd been at Harvard. The distance between their lives suddenly felt vast. That's great," she managed. "You always were the smart one." "No, I wasn't. You were the one with all the ideas. Remember when we planned to open that restaurant together?" Maya's chest tightened. She remembered everything. Summer afternoons when they were 14, sitting on the fire escape outside her family's apartment, dreaming about their future. Diego would handle the business side, Maya would be the chef. They'd serve food that reminded people of home, the way Abuela's cooking always did. "We were kids," she said quietly. "We were, but we meant it." Diego turned to face her. "At least I did." The memories came flooding back then, as clear as if they'd happened yesterday. Diego at age 8, crying because the older kids made fun of his secondhand sneakers. Maya sharing her lunch with him when his parents couldn't afford school meals. Building forts out of cardboard boxes in the alley behind their building. Diego helping her with math homework while she helped him practice English. His family had lived in the apartment directly above hers. His father, Roberto, worked construction when he could find jobs. His mother, Carmen, cleaned houses and took care of other people's kids. They weren't poor exactly, but money was always tight. Just like everyone else in the neighborhood. Maya remembered the exact day everything changed. She was 16, working part-time at a local diner after school. Diego came running in, breathless with excitement. "Maya, you'll never believe it. Papa got the contract for the new shopping center. The big one downtown. He's hiring 20 guys. She'd been happy for him then. The Castellanos family deserved good news. Roberto had been trying to grow his construction business for years, bidding on bigger projects, taking risks that sometimes didn't pay off. But that contract led to another, then another. Within 6 months, Roberto Castellanos Construction was one of the fastest growing companies in the city. The family moved out of their cramped apartment and into a house in Lincoln Park. Diego transferred to a private school with better college prep programs. I wanted to stay in touch, Diego said now, as if reading her thoughts. But everything happened so fast. New school, new friends, college applications. And then you realized you didn't need us anymore, Maya finished. That's not what happened, isn't it? Maya turned to face him. When's the last time you visited the old neighborhood, Diego? When's the last time you talked to anyone from before your family got money? Diego was quiet for a long moment. You're right, he said finally. I got caught up in a different world. But I never forgot you, Maya. I never forgot any of it. Then why are you here? Why now? Diego pulled out his phone and showed her something on the screen. It was a news article with his picture. The headline read, Castellanos Industries CEO named Chicago's most influential under 30. Maya stared at the photo. Even in business magazines, she could see traces of the boy she'd known. But the article talked about billion-dollar deals and international expansion. This wasn't just success. This was wealth beyond anything she could imagine. Castellanos Industries, she repeated. You run your father's company? I do. He stepped back 2 years ago, said it was time for the next generation. Diego put the phone away. Maya, I have more money than I know what to do with. I live in a penthouse downtown, drive cars that cost more than most people's houses. But you know what I think about every day? Maya shook her head. Those afternoons on your fire escape. The way your abuela would make us help in the kitchen even though we were terrible at it. The way you'd defend me when the other kids picked on me. The way we promised we'd never leave each other behind. But you did leave me behind, Maya said softly. I know, and I've regretted it every day since. They sat in silence, watching office workers hurry past on their way back to air-conditioned buildings. Maya felt overwhelmed by the gap between them. Diego had become everything they'd dreamed of, successful, wealthy, powerful. Meanwhile, she was still fighting the same battles her family had always fought. What do you want from me, Diego? She asked finally. He looked at her with those same eyes that had looked at her across homework assignments and shared lunches and whispered secrets. I want my friend back, he said simply. I want to figure out how to bridge this gap between who we used to be and who we are now. Maya wanted to believe him. But looking at his expensive clothes and remembering her unpaid bills, she wondered if some gaps were just too wide to cross. I have to get back to work, she said, standing up. Dinner rush starts in an hour. Diego stood too. Can I see you again? Maybe when you're not working. Maya hesitated. Part of her wanted to say yes, to believe that friendship could survive such different paths. But part of her was scared of what she might discover about the boy she'd once loved like a brother. I don't know, she said honestly. I need time to think. Diego nodded, disappointment flickering across his face. I understand, but Maya, I meant what I said. I never forgot you. I never forgot where I came from. As Maya walked back to her truck, she wondered if that was really true. And more importantly, she wondered if it mattered anymore. The next day, Maya hoped the whole encounter with Diego had been some kind of stress-induced hallucination. But when she arrived at Meridian Tower for lunch service, there he was again. Different suit, same expensive watch, same patient smile as he waited in line behind a dozen other customers. Maya's stomach knotted as she served the people ahead of him. A part of her had hoped he wouldn't come back, that their awkward reunion would be the end of it. Seeing him again made everything real in a way that scared her. When Diego reached the front of the line, he ordered the same thing as yesterday. 2 beef tacos, extra salsa verde. $12, Maya said, keeping her voice neutral. He handed her a 20 again, and again told her to keep the change. But this time, instead of walking away, he stepped aside and waited until her line cleared. How's your day going? He asked when the last customer left. Fine. Maya busied herself cleaning the griddle, avoiding eye contact. Maya, I was thinking about what you said yesterday. About me leaving everyone behind. You're right, and I want to make things right. You don't owe me anything, Diego. I think I do. Maya looked up then, frustrated by his persistence. What do you want from me? You want forgiveness? Fine, you're forgiven. You want to catch up on old times? We just did that. Now can you please let me work? But Diego kept coming back. Day after day, he'd show up during lunch service, order the same 2 tacos, leave the same generous tip, and try to start conversations that Maya didn't want to have. After a week of this routine, Maya was getting annoyed. Don't you have important CEO things to do? She asked on Thursday, handing him his usual order. I do, but this is important too. Standing in line for tacos? Talking to you. Maya shook her head. We're not kids anymore, Diego. You can't just decide we're friends again because you feel guilty about the past. Is that what you think this is? Guilt? I think you're bored. I think you're successful and rich and you've got everything you ever wanted. So now you're feeling nostalgic about the good old days when life was simple. Diego was quiet for a moment. The good old days when we shared a box of crackers for dinner because neither of our families had money for groceries? Maya flinched. She'd forgotten he remembered those times too. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. And you're wrong. I'm not here because I'm bored or nostalgic. I'm here because I miss my best friend. The words hit harder than Maya expected. She turned away, pretending to organize the condiment containers. Your best friend doesn't exist anymore. I'm not the same person you knew. Neither am I. But maybe that's okay. By the second week, Maya was getting questions from her other customers. Mrs. Patterson, the security guard, asked if the man in the expensive suits was bothering her. The nurses from the medical center wanted to know if she had a rich boyfriend. Even Tony from the construction site had heard rumors. Some fancy guy's been sniffing around your truck, he said during breakfast service. You want me to have a talk with him? No, Tony, he's an old friend. Old friends don't usually dress like they own the city, Tony replied, eyeing her suspiciously. Maya couldn't argue with that logic. Diego's daily visits were drawing attention she didn't want. People in the neighborhood were starting to talk, and in a place where everyone knew everyone else's business, that was never good. On Friday of the second week, Maya's worst fear came true. She was counting the day's earnings when her phone rang. The number on the screen made her stomach sink. Miss Rodriguez, this is David Chen from Metro Truck Financing. We need to discuss your account. Maya stepped out of the truck for privacy. I know I'm behind on payments. I'll have something for you next week. Miss Rodriguez, your account is 4 months past due. We've sent multiple notices. If we don't receive payment in full by Monday, we'll have no choice but to begin repossession proceedings. The world seemed to tilt sideways. How much? $867, including late fees. Maya closed her eyes. She had maybe $200 to her name. Can I make a partial payment? I'll give you half now and half next month. I'm sorry, but at this point we need the full amount. We've been very patient. When Maya hung up, she felt like she couldn't breathe. Without the truck, she had nothing. No income, no way to pay for her mother's medical bills, no roof over her head. She'd be back to where she started, except worse because now she'd failed at the one thing her grandmother had trusted her with. Maya, are you okay? She turned to find Diego approaching, concern written across his face. Of course he'd chosen this moment to show up early. I'm fine, she lied, wiping her eyes quickly. You're crying. I'm not. It's just the wind. Diego looked around at the perfectly still afternoon air. Maya, what's wrong? Nothing you need to worry about. Rich people problems are different from regular people problems. Try me. Maya wanted to tell him to go away, to stop pretending he cared about her small, insignificant struggles. But the words that came out instead were, they're taking my truck. What? The financing company? I'm 4 months behind on payments. They want $800 by Monday or they repossess it. The words tumbled out before she could stop them, and I don't have it. I don't even have half of it. Diego's face darkened. $800? That's it? That's it? That's everything I have and more. That's my whole life. Maya, I can write you a check right now. Consider it a loan between friends. No. The word came out sharper than she'd intended. Why not? Because we're not friends, Diego. We were friends when we were kids and had nothing. Now you have everything and I have nothing, and that's not friendship. That's charity. That's not... Yes, it is. You see me struggling and you want to swoop in and fix everything with your money. Well, I don't need fixing and I don't need your pity. Diego stepped closer. It's not pity. You need help and I can help. What's wrong with that? Everything. Because next month I'll need help again and the month after that. Where does it end? When do I stop being your charity case and start being your equal? Maya, forget it. I'll figure something out. I always do. Maya turned to go back into her truck, but Diego's next word stopped her cold. Maya, there's something else. Something I need to tell you about this neighborhood. She turned back, not liking the tone in his voice. What about it? The city's approved a redevelopment project for this area. All these old buildings, the small businesses, they're going to be torn down, replaced with luxury condos and chain restaurants. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. When? The bulldozers start in 6 months. How do you know that? Diego hesitated just a moment too long. Because my company is one of the developers. The betrayal hit Maya like a physical blow. Your company. Maya, let me explain. You bastard. The words came out quiet, deadly. You've been coming here every day pretending to care about me, while planning to destroy everything I have left. It's not like that. I didn't know you worked here when the project started. And now that I do know, I'm trying to find another way. Another way? Or are you just trying to convince me to sell my spot quietly so your project goes smoothly? Maya, please, get away from me. Maya's voice was shaking with rage. Get away from my truck, get away from my neighborhood, and don't come back. Maya, if you just listen. I said get away. Diego stood there for a moment, looking like he wanted to say more. But Maya had already turned her back on him and climbed into her truck. She slammed the service window shut and didn't look out again until she heard his footsteps walking away. Sitting alone in her truck, surrounded by the smell of spices and the sound of her own ragged breathing, Maya felt more betrayed than she ever had in her life. The boy she'd once trusted with all her secrets had grown up to become exactly the kind of person who destroyed places like this. And she'd almost been stupid enough to trust him again. 3 weeks passed without Diego showing up at Maya's truck. 3 weeks of Maya telling herself she was glad he was gone, while secretly looking for his face in every lunch crowd. 3 weeks of trying to pretend her heart didn't sink a little when he didn't appear. The truck was gone now. On Monday morning, exactly as promised, the repo men had come with a tow truck and taken away everything Maya had left of her grandmother's legacy. She'd stood on the sidewalk watching them load it up, feeling like she was watching her whole life disappear. But Mrs. Chen had surprised her. The owner of Chen's family restaurant had offered Maya a job cooking in her kitchen. It wasn't the same as running her own business, but it was honest work that paid enough to cover rent and groceries. Maya threw herself into the job, working double shifts and pretending she didn't miss the independence of her truck. On a rainy Thursday evening, Maya was closing up the restaurant when she heard familiar voices outside. Through the window, she saw Tony from the construction site talking to a group of neighbors. They all looked upset about something. Maya stepped outside, wiping her hands on her apron. What's going on? Oh, Maya. Mrs. Garcia from the old neighborhood spotted her. Perfect timing. We're trying to figure out what to do about these developers. Developers? Tony nodded grimly. They want to tear down everything from 5th Street to 8th Street. All the small businesses, the old apartments, everything. Replace it with fancy condos that cost $3,000 a month. Maya's stomach dropped. This was the project Diego had mentioned. His project. But here's the weird thing, Mrs. Garcia continued. One of the developers has been fighting it. Word is there's some rich kid whose company is involved, but he's been arguing with his own board of directors trying to stop the whole thing. What do you mean? Maya asked. My cousin works at City Hall, Tony explained. She says this guy, some CEO named Castellanos, has been showing up to every planning meeting, proposing alternative developments that would preserve the neighborhood character. His own partners are furious with him. Maya felt like the ground was shifting under her feet. Castellanos? Yeah, you know him. Apparently he grew up around here, back when his family was regular folks like us. Now he's rich as anything. But he's fighting to save our neighborhood. Go figure. Maya excused herself and walked home in a daze. Diego had been fighting the redevelopment. All this time she'd thought he was part of the problem. He'd actually been trying to protect the neighborhood. That night Maya couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Tony's words and about the look in Diego's eyes when she'd told him to stay away. What if she'd been wrong about his motives? The answer came 2 days later in the most unexpected way. Maya was visiting her mother at the dialysis center when the billing coordinator, Janet, called her over to the desk. Maya, I need to update your mother's payment information, Janet said, pulling out a thick file. Is there a problem with the insurance? No, nothing like that. It's about the Good Neighbor Foundation payments. They've been covering your mother's co-pays and medication costs for the past 8 months, but we need to verify the contact information. Maya stared at her. What foundation? Janet looked confused. The Good Neighbor Foundation. They've been paying about $1,500 a month toward your mother's treatment. You didn't know? No, I thought insurance was covering everything. Insurance covers most of it, but there are always co-pays and medication costs. The foundation has been taking care of all of that. Janet shuffled through the papers. Here's the contact information we have on file. Maya looked at the paper Janet handed her. The address was for a law firm downtown. The foundation's full name was Good Neighbor Community Health Foundation. Can you tell me anything else about this foundation? Not much. They contacted us about 8 months ago. Said they wanted to help with medical bills for families in your zip code. Very professional, very discreet. They just send the payments directly to us. 8 months ago. Right around the time Diego would have learned about his family's redevelopment project. Right around the time Maya had started working at Meridian Tower. Maya left the dialysis center and drove straight to the law firm listed on the foundation paperwork. The receptionist was polite but unhelpful until Maya mentioned the Good Neighbor Foundation. Oh, you'll want to speak with Mr. Peterson. He handles that account. The woman made a quick phone call. He can see you now. Mr. Peterson was a kind-faced man in his 60s who invited Maya into his office and closed the door. Miss Rodriguez, I was wondering when you might figure it out, he said with a smile. So you know who I am? I know you're the reason that foundation exists. My client was very specific about wanting to help with medical bills in your neighborhood, particularly for families dealing with kidney disease. Maya's throat felt tight. Your client? I am not supposed to reveal his identity, but given the circumstances. Mr. Peterson opened a file on his desk. Diego Castellanos. He set up the foundation last year with a $5 million endowment. Said he wanted to help people in the neighborhood where he grew up. Maya sat in stunned silence. He was very insistent that recipients shouldn't know where the money was coming from, Mr. Peterson continued. Said he didn't want it to feel like charity. He wanted it to feel like community members helping each other. $5 million, Maya whispered. That's just the start. The foundation is designed to grow and help more families over time. Your mother's treatment is just one of about 40 families currently receiving assistance. Maya left the lawyer's office feeling like her whole world had been turned upside down. Diego hadn't just been trying to reconnect with her out of nostalgia or guilt. He'd been quietly helping her family, helping her whole neighborhood for months. She found him that evening at his office building. The security guard was reluctant to let her up without an appointment, but when Maya mentioned Diego's name, he made a phone call and waved her through. Diego's office was on the 40th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. When the elevator doors opened, Maya saw him standing by those windows, still wearing his expensive suit but looking tired in a way that reminded her of the boy she'd once known. Maya. He turned when he heard her footsteps. I didn't expect... The Good Neighbor Foundation? Maya said quietly. Diego's shoulders sagged slightly. You found out. My mother's medical bills. You've been paying them for 8 months. Maya, I can explain. And the redevelopment project. Tony says you've been fighting your own board of directors to stop it. Diego nodded slowly. I've been trying to find alternatives, ways to improve the neighborhood without destroying it. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were right about the charity thing. I didn't want you to feel like I was trying to buy your friendship or like you owed me anything. Maya walked over to the windows and looked out at the city lights. From up here, the neighborhood where she'd grown up looked small and distant. I was wrong about you, she said finally. No, you weren't. Not entirely. I did abandon the neighborhood when my family got money. I got caught up in a different world and forgot what mattered, but losing touch with you, that was the biggest mistake I ever made. Maya turned to face him. So what happens now? Now, I have a proposal for you. Not the romantic kind, he added quickly, seeing her expression. A business proposal. Diego walked to his desk and pulled out a thick folder. I've been working on this for months. A community development plan that would bring investment to the neighborhood, without pushing out the people who live there. Mixed income housing, spaces for local businesses, a community center. He opened the folder and showed her detailed architectural plans. And here, right in the center, would be a food hall. A permanent space for local food vendors, including a spot for anyone who wants to bring back a certain yellow food truck. Maya stared at the plans. They were beautiful, thoughtful, designed to lift up the community rather than replace it. I can't do this alone, Diego continued. I need someone who understands the neighborhood, who knows what the community actually wants. I need a partner. A partner? An equal partner. Someone who can help me remember where I came from and why this matters. Maya looked at the plans, then at Diego, then back at the plans. This was bigger than anything she'd ever dreamed of. It was the restaurant they'd imagined as kids, grown up into something that could help hundreds of people. I'll need my truck back, she said finally. Diego smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him since he'd started visiting her truck. Already taken care of. It's in a garage downtown being restored to better than new. And this partnership, it's really equal? Equal in every way that matters. I bring the money and the business connections. You bring the heart and the community knowledge. We both bring the dream. Maya extended her hand. Then I guess we're partners. Diego shook her hand, and for a moment they were just two kids from the old neighborhood again, making plans to change the world one meal at a time. 6 months later, construction began on the Maya Rodriguez Community Culinary Center, anchored by a bright yellow food truck that served the best tacos in Chicago. And if the CEO of Castellanos Industries was often seen there, helping to serve food and talking to community members about their needs, well, that was just how things worked when you remembered where you came from.